The Pacific Ocean stretched endlessly beyond the Malibu cliffs as Sarah Martinez adjusted her cathedral-length veil one final time. The $50,000 Vera Wang gown hugged her curves perfectly, its hand-sewn pearls catching the golden afternoon light that filtered through the estate's ancient oak trees. 300 of California's elite-filled white Chiavari chairs arranged in perfect rows across the manicured lawn, their designer outfits and glittering jewelry creating a sea of wealth and influence that would make the society pages for months. Sarah's heart hammered against her ribs as the string quartet began the processional. This was it, the moment she dreamed of since Marcus proposed on this very cliff 18 months ago. The Thornfield estate, with its sprawling gardens and panoramic ocean views, had cost them nearly $500,000 to rent for the weekend. But Marcus insisted nothing was too extravagant for their special day. Tech billionaires, Hollywood A-listers, and political powerhouses had flown in from around the world to witness their union. "You look absolutely radiant, darling," whispered her maid of honor, Sophia, adjusting the train of Sarah's dress. "Marcus is going to lose his mind when he sees you." Sarah smiled, though something felt off. She couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched, not by the guests, but by someone else entirely. Throughout the morning preparations, she'd noticed unfamiliar faces among the catering staff, their eyes too alert, their movements too precise for typical wedding vendors. When she'd mentioned it to Marcus during their brief moment together before the ceremony, he'd brushed off her concerns with a nervous laugh. The music swelled as Sarah began her walk down the rose-petal-strewn aisle. Governor Richardson sat in the front row beside tech mogul James Chun and his wife. Behind them, she spotted Academy Award winner Miranda Stone, dabbing her eyes with a silk handkerchief. The guest list read like a who's who of American power and influence, exactly the kind of wedding that would dominate social media and entertainment news for weeks. Marcus stood at the altar in his custom Tom Ford tuxedo, his dark hair perfectly styled, his smile bright enough to power the string lights that would illuminate their reception. He was everything she'd ever wanted: successful, charming, devastatingly handsome, and completely devoted to her. As CEO of Martinez Tech Solutions, he built an empire from nothing, and now he was offering to share it all with her. But as Sarah drew closer, she noticed something wrong with Marcus's expression. His smile seemed forced, and sweat beaded on his forehead despite the cool ocean breeze. His eyes kept darting to something behind her, scanning the crowd with an intensity that made her stomach clench. "Dearly beloved," began Reverend Thompson, his voice carrying across the silent gathering, "we are gathered here today to witness the union of Marcus James Rodriguez and Sarah Elena Martinez in holy matrimony." The ceremony proceeded flawlessly. Sarah's responses came automatically, her voice steady despite the growing unease in her chest. When it came time for the vows, Marcus took her hands in his, and she felt them trembling slightly. "Sarah," he began, his voice thick with emotion, "from the moment I met you 3 years ago, you've been my everything. You've made me want to be a better man, to build a life worthy of your love." His eyes glistened with unshed tears, but Sarah noticed they kept flicking to the crowd behind her. "I promise to protect you, to cherish you, to—" Marcus stopped mid-sentence, his face draining of all color. His grip on her hands tightened painfully as his gaze fixed on something over her shoulder. Sarah started to turn, but Marcus's voice stopped her cold. "Sarah, I love you more than life itself, but I can't." His voice cracked as he released her hands and stepped backward. "I'm so sorry. I can't do this." The collective gasp from 300 guests hit like a physical blow. Sarah stood frozen, a bouquet of white roses and baby's breath trembling in her hands as Marcus ripped the wireless microphone from his lapel and shoved it into Reverend Thompson's shocked hands. "Marcus, what are you?" Sarah's voice came out as barely a whisper. but he was already moving, his face a mask of terror and determination. He grabbed her shoulders, his eyes boring into hers with desperate intensity. "Trust me," he whispered so quietly only she could hear. "Whatever happens next, remember that I love you." Then he was actually running down the aisle in his $1,000 shoes, pushing past bewildered guests who rose from their seats in confusion. Sarah watched in horror as the man she was supposed to marry disappeared through the estate's main entrance, leaving her standing alone at the altar in front of everyone who mattered in their world. The murmur of confused voices rose around her like a tide. Sophia rushed to her side, wrapping a protective arm around Sarah's shoulders, but Sarah barely felt it. Her mind reeled, trying to process what had just happened. This wasn't Marcus. The Marcus she knew was confident, unshakable, the kind of man who faced down hostile corporate takeovers without breaking a sweat. "Ladies and gentlemen," Reverend Thompson's voice wavered as he attempted damage control. "Perhaps we should." His words were cut off by a sound that made every head turn skyward, the distant thrum of helicopter rotors growing louder by the second. Sarah looked up to see black dots on the horizon, moving fast across the azure sky around her. The guests began pulling out their phones, but instead of taking pictures of the wedding disaster, they were all checking messages with increasingly alarmed expressions. Governor Richardson stood abruptly, his security detail materializing from the crowd with practiced efficiency. Tech mogul Chun was already on his phone, speaking in rapid, urgent tones. "What's happening?" Sarah asked Sophia, but her maid of honor was staring at her own phone screen, her face pale. "Sarah." Sophia's voice was barely audible over the growing roar of approaching aircraft. "I just got an emergency alert. We need to." The helicopters crested the cliff line like mechanical vultures, their black silhouettes blotting out the sun. Not one or two, but dozens of them, moving in perfect formation toward the estate. The sound was deafening now, drowning out the screams of terrified guests as they realized this wasn't part of any wedding celebration. Sarah's bouquet fell from nerveless fingers as she watched the aircraft descend. The white roses scattered across the altar like fallen snow, their petals mixing with the rose petals that had marked her path to what should have been the happiest moment of her life. But as the first helicopter touched down on the estate's tennis court, disgorging figures in tactical gear, Sarah felt a chill that had nothing to do with the ocean breeze. Deep in her gut, she knew this wasn't random. This wasn't a coincidence. This was about her. The perfect wedding had become something else entirely, something that would change everything she thought she knew about her life, her identity, and the man who had just broken her heart to save her life. The first helicopter hadn't even finished landing when the estate's wrought iron gates exploded inward with a thunderous crash of twisted metal. Sarah watched in stunned disbelief as a convoy of black Chevrolet Suburbans roared through the destroyed entrance, their armored hulls gleaming like beetles as they tore across the pristine lawn that had taken the groundskeepers 3 days to perfect. "Everyone down, now." The voice boomed across the estate through a military-grade loudspeaker, but the 300 wedding guests were already scattering like startled birds. Governor Richardson's security team formed a protective circle around him, their weapons drawn, while Hollywood elite dove behind overturned chairs and floral arrangements that moments before had been Instagram-worthy backdrops. Sarah stood paralyzed at the altar, her $50,000 gown billowing in the rotor wash as more helicopters descended around the estate's perimeter. These weren't news choppers or police aircraft. They were military Black Hawks, their sides bristling with equipment and personnel rappelling down thick ropes like deadly spiders. "Sarah, we have to move." Sophia grabbed her arm, trying to pull her toward the main house, but Sarah couldn't process what was happening. The cognitive dissonance was too extreme. One moment she was exchanging vows with the love of her life. The next, she was in the middle of what looked like a military invasion. The lead Suburban skidded to a halt just yards from the altar, its doors flying open to disgorge figures in full tactical gear. But these weren't ordinary soldiers. The patches on their uniforms bore the distinctive trident insignia that made Sarah's blood run cold. Navy SEALs. The most elite fighting force in the world had just crashed her wedding. Dr. Elena Vasquez, the lead operative, called out, removing his helmet to reveal a weathered face with steel gray eyes. "I'm Commander Jake Morrison, SEAL Team 6. We're here for immediate extraction." The name hit Sarah like a physical blow, driving the air from her lungs. Elena Vasquez. She hadn't heard that name spoken aloud in 3 years, not since the night she'd watched her family's house burn on the evening news while hiding in a federal safe house. That name was supposed to be dead, buried so deep that even she sometimes forgot it had ever existed. "I don't know what you're talking about," Sarah managed to whisper, but her voice carried no conviction. Around them, the chaos intensified as more SEALs established a defensive perimeter, their weapons trained outward while terrified guests cowered behind whatever cover they could find. Commander Morrison stepped closer, his expression grim. "Ma'am, we don't have time for this." 3 hours ago, Diego Mendoza escaped federal custody during a prisoner transport. He's en route to this location with a full tactical team, and our intelligence indicates he's planning to eliminate you before you can testify at his trial next week. The world tilted sideways. Diego Mendoza, the name that haunted her nightmares, the monster who had ordered her family's execution when she tried to expose his cartel's bioweapon operation. She'd spent 2 years developing synthetic compounds for what she thought was legitimate pharmaceutical research, only to discover her work was being weaponized to create an untraceable poison that would make the Mendoza cartel untouchable. "That's impossible," Sarah said. But even as the words left her mouth, pieces began falling into place. Marcus's strange behavior over the past week, the unfamiliar faces among the catering staff, the way he'd kept checking his phone during their rehearsal dinner, his face growing more troubled with each message. "Your handler received credible intelligence about the threat at 14:30 hours. Morrison continued, consulting a tactical watch. "Agent Rodriguez was ordered to abort the ceremony and extract you immediately. But when he saw Mendoza's advance team already in position among the service staff, he made the decision to run and draw their attention away from you." Agent Rodriguez. The words hit like a sledgehammer. "Marcus isn't. He's not really. Marcus Rodriguez has been your protection detail for the past 2 years, ma'am. Working joint operations with the Marshal Service. His feelings for you became complicated, which is why this extraction became necessary." Sarah's legs gave out, and she sank onto the altar steps, her wedding dress pooling around her like spilled cream. Everything she thought she knew about her life was a lie. The man she'd fallen in love with, planned to marry, shared her bed with for 2 years. He was a federal agent assigned to keep her alive. "The guests," she managed to say, looking around at the chaos. "These people have nothing to do with this." "Negative, ma'am. Mendoza's MO is to eliminate all witnesses. Everyone at this wedding is now a target." Morrison's radio crackled with urgent chatter. "We've got movement on the perimeter. Multiple vehicles approaching from the coast road." Through the estate's trees, Sarah could see dust clouds rising from the winding access road that led up from Pacific Coast Highway. Too many vehicles moving too fast. Her heart hammered as she realized the full scope of what was happening. Mendoza hadn't just come for her. He'd come to send a message written in the blood of California's most powerful people. "Ma'am, we need to move now," Morrison urged, but Sarah was already shaking her head. "These people are here because of me. I won't let them die because I was too cowardly to face Mendoza 3 years ago." "Dr. Vasquez, it's Sarah," she said firmly, rising to her feet with new determination. Elena Vasquez died the night my family was murdered. But Sarah Martinez isn't running anymore. The sound of gunfire erupted from the estate's eastern perimeter, sharp cracks that sent the remaining guests into full panic. Morrison barked orders into his radio as his team adjusted their positions, but Sarah could see they were outnumbered. The SEALs were elite, but they'd come for an extraction, not a full-scale battle. "How many men does Mendoza have?" Sarah asked. "Intelligence suggests 40 to 50 cartel soldiers, plus whatever local assets he's recruited." Morrison's expression was grim. "We've got 20 operators and whatever backup we can call in, but air support is 15 minutes out." Sarah looked around at the wedding venue that had become a battlefield. Overturned tables provided minimal cover, and the open lawn offered no protection from the high ground that surrounded the estate. But she knew this place. She and Marcus had spent months planning every detail of their wedding, walking every inch of the grounds. "Commander," she said, her voice steady despite the terror coursing through her veins, "I know this estate better than anyone. The wine cellar has reinforced walls and only one entrance. We can funnel the civilians down there and make our stand from the main house." Morrison studied her for a moment, then nodded. "What about you, ma'am?" Sarah looked down at her wedding dress, then back at the chaos around her. Somewhere out there, Marcus, or whatever his real name was risking his life to protect her. The least she could do was return the favor. "I'm done hiding, Commander. It's time Diego Mendoza learned what happens when you threaten my family." The irony wasn't lost on her, on what should have been the happiest day of her life. She was finally ready to reclaim the identity that had cost her everything. The wine cellar of the Thornfield estate had been designed to house a collection worth millions, but now it served as an impromptu bunker for 250 terrified wedding guests. Sarah descended the stone steps, her wedding dress hiked up to avoid tripping. As Commander Morrison's team herded celebrities and politicians into the reinforced underground space. "This is insane," Governor Richardson muttered, his usually perfect hair disheveled as he crouched behind a rack of vintage Bordeaux. "I have a security detail." "Where the hell are they?" "Dead or compromised," Morrison replied bluntly, checking his weapon. "Mendoza's people have been planning this for weeks. They knew exactly who would be here and how to neutralize your protection." Sarah felt the weight of 300 lives pressing down on her shoulders. These people, her friends, colleagues, the cream of California society, were trapped because of her past. Because she'd been naive enough to think she could build a new life on the foundation of lies and federal protection. "Dr. Vasquez," Morrison said quietly, pulling her aside, "I need you to understand what we're dealing with. Diego Mendoza isn't just a cartel leader, he's a tactician. The bioweapon you helped develop, even unknowingly, has made him one of the most dangerous men in the Western Hemisphere." Sarah closed her eyes, remembering those 2 years of research at Helix Pharmaceuticals. She'd been so proud of her work on synthetic neurotoxins, believing she was developing treatments for neurological disorders. The breakthrough had come when she discovered how to make the compounds undetectable in standard toxicology. Screens a feature she'd thought would help doctors monitor patient compliance. "How many people has he killed with my research?" she asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to know the answer. 43 confirmed assassinations across 6 countries, Morrison replied. Politicians, judges, rival cartel leaders, journalists, all died of apparent heart attacks or strokes. No evidence, no witnesses, no way to prove murder. The guilt hit her like a physical blow. 43 people dead because of her work. Families destroyed. Justice perverted. All because she'd been too trusting to question why a pharmaceutical company needed such specific modifications to her compounds. "There's more," Morrison continued. "The reason Mendoza wants you dead isn't just revenge. You're the only person who can testify about the weapon's capabilities and provide the chemical signatures needed to detect it. Without your testimony, he walks free next week." Sarah's radio crackled. Morrison had given her a comm unit so she could coordinate with his team. "Commander, this is Bravo Team. We've got eyes on the target convoy. 12 vehicles, estimated 60 hostiles. They're setting up a perimeter around the estate." "Copy that." "Bravo. Hold position and wait for my signal." Sarah moved to one of the cellar's small windows, peering through the reinforced glass at the grounds above. She could see muzzle flashes in the tree line as Mendoza's forces engaged Morrison's outer perimeter. The SEALs were good, but they were vastly outnumbered. "Sarah?" Sophia appeared at her elbow, still clutching her maid of honor bouquet like a talisman. "I don't understand any of this. Who is Elena Vasquez? Why are these people trying to kill you?" Before Sarah could answer, a new voice cut through the chaos familiar, "Beloved," and transmitted through the estate's PS system that Marcus had insisted on installing for their wedding announcements. "Diego, I know you can hear me." Marcus's voice echoed through the cellar, causing Sarah's heart to skip. "This is Agent Marcus Rodriguez D. I have what you want." Sarah grabbed Morrison's radio. "Where is he? How is he accessing the PA system?" "Unknown, ma'am. He's not responding to our comms." Marcus's voice continued, steady despite the gunfire in the background. "I'm in the main house with the research files Elena stole from Helix Pharmaceuticals. The complete synthesis protocols, the antidote formulations, everything. You want to make a trade? Her life for the files?" "No," Sarah whispered, but she knew Marcus couldn't hear her. Morrison was already moving. "He's buying us time, but he's also painting a target on himself. Mendoza will send everything he has at that house." Through the window, Sarah watched as the pattern of gunfire shifted. Mendoza's forces were indeed converging on the main house, their muzzle flashes creating a deadly constellation in the gathering dusk. The wedding lights that should have illuminated their first dance now cast eerie shadows across a battlefield. "I have to get to him," Sarah said, but Morrison blocked her path. "Negative. That's exactly what Mendoza wants to draw you out." "You don't understand," Sarah's voice cracked with emotion. "Marcus isn't just my handler. He's... God, I don't even know what's real anymore, but I love him. And if he dies because of me? Ma'am, Agent Rodriguez knew the risks when he took this assignment. His job is to keep you alive long enough to testify." Sarah stared at Morrison, seeing the cold calculation in his eyes. To him, she was an asset to be protected. Marcus was an expendable operative, and the wedding guests were acceptable collateral damage. But to her, these were real people with real lives, and she was done letting others pay the price for her mistakes. "Commander, I need to tell you something about the estate's layout," she said, moving to a wine rack along the far wall. "Marcus and I spent months planning this wedding. We explored every inch of this property." She pulled on a specific bottle, a 1947 Chateau de Quem, that the estate's owner had shown them during their initial tour. The wine rack swung inward, revealing a narrow tunnel that led toward the main house. "Prohibition-era smuggling tunnel," Sarah explained as Morrison stared in surprise. "The original owner used it to move bootleg liquor from the docks to the house. It connects to the wine cellar in the main house basement. Dr. Vasquez, I cannot allow you to. It's not your choice anymore, Commander." Sarah's voice carried a steel that surprised even her. "I'm done being Elena Vasquez, the victim who ran and hid. I'm done being Sarah Martinez, the naive bride who let others fight her battles. Those files Marcus mentioned? I didn't steal them from Helix. I created backup copies because I suspected something was wrong. The real files, the ones with the complete antidote formulations, are in my head." She tapped her temple. "Eidetic memory, Commander. Every formula, every synthesis pathway, every molecular structure. Mendoza can torture Marcus all he wants, but he'll never get what he really needs without me. Morrison's expression shifted as he realized the implications. You're the key to everything. Exactly. And it's time I stopped running from that responsibility. Sarah gathered up her wedding dress, preparing to enter the tunnel. Keep the guests safe, Commander. I'm going to end this. As she stepped into the darkness of the smuggling tunnel, Sarah heard Morrison speaking urgently into his radio. All teams, be advised the asset is mobile and heading for the main house. Repeat, Dr. Vasquez is in the wind. But Sarah was no longer Dr. Vasquez, and she was no longer just Sarah Martinez. She was something new, someone who had finally found the courage to face the monster that had destroyed her family and threatened everyone she cared about. The tunnel stretched ahead into darkness, leading toward the man she loved and the confrontation that would determine whether her wedding day would end in tragedy or triumph. The smuggling tunnel reeked of decades-old wine and damp earth as Sarah crawled through the narrow passage, her wedding dress catching on rough stone walls. Behind her, the muffled sounds of gunfire grew more intense, while ahead lay only darkness and the unknown. Her hands scraped against the tunnel floor, the delicate lace of her sleeves tearing on jagged rocks. But she pressed forward with grim determination. The tunnel emerged in the main house's wine cellar, just as she'd remembered from the estate tour. Sarah pushed open the hidden panel and stepped into the basement, immediately hearing Marcus's voice echoing from somewhere above. He was still talking to Mendoza over the PA system, his tone calm and professional despite the chaos surrounding the house. The synthesis requires a specific temperature gradient during the crystallization phase, Marcus was saying, clearly stalling for time. Without the exact parameters, the compound becomes inert. Elena documented everything in her private notes. Sarah crept up the basement stairs, her bare feet silent on the hardwood floors. The main house was eerily quiet compared to the battle raging outside, but she could see muzzle flashes through the windows as Mendoza's forces tightened. Their noose around the building dot, she found Marcus in the estate's study, surrounded by scattered papers and speaking into a handheld radio. His tuxedo was torn and blood-stained, and a makeshift bandage covered his left shoulder. When he saw her, his face went white with terror and relief. "Sarah, what the hell are you doing here?" he whispered, cutting off his transmission. "You're supposed to be in the wine cellar with Morrison's team." "My name is Elena," she said quietly, moving to the window to assess their situation. "And I'm tired of other people dying for my mistakes." Through the bulletproof glass, she could see at least 30 cartel soldiers surrounding the house, their positions marked by the red dots of laser sights dancing across the walls. They had the high ground, superior numbers, and enough firepower to level the entire estate. "Elena," Marcus said, and hearing her real name from his lips sent a shiver through her. "I need you to know that everything I told you about my feelings was real. The assignment was to protect you, but falling in love with you, that was never part of the plan." She turned to face him, seeing the man she'd fallen in love with beneath the federal agent facade. "What's your real name?" "Marcus Rodriguez." That part was always true. He managed a weak smile. The agents don't get very creative cover identities. "Good," she said, moving to the study's chemistry set, a decorative piece the estate owner had installed to impress guests, but functional nonetheless. "Because I'm going to need my husband's help to get us out of this." "Husband?" Marcus stared at her in confusion. "We never finished the ceremony," Sarah said, beginning to mix compounds from the chemistry set with practiced precision. "But I'm pretty sure 'Till death do us part' covers situations like this." Her hands moved with the muscle memory of years in the laboratory, combining household chemicals in precise ratios. Ammonia from the cleaning supplies, hydrogen peroxide from the first aid kit, glycerin from the estate's soap dispensers. Not enough to create her original bioweapon, but sufficient for something far more immediate. What are you making? Marcus asked, wincing as he tried to reload his service weapon with his injured arm. Wedding favors, Sarah replied grimly. The kind that go boom. The radio crackled with a new voice, heavily accented, dripping with malice. Agent Rodriguez, you have 5 minutes to send out Dr. Elena Vasquez, or we start executing the wedding guests one by one. We have the wine cellar surrounded. Sarah's blood ran cold. Morrison's defensive position had been compromised. The guests are friends, colleagues. Innocent people who'd come to celebrate her happiness were now hostages in a war they never should have been part of. Diego Mendoza, she said, taking the radio from Marcus. This is Dr. Elena Vasquez. You want me? Come and get me. Ah, the brilliant chemist finally shows herself. Mendoza's voice oozed satisfaction. You cost me 2 years of profits and 3 of my best laboratories. Time to settle accounts. I'll make you a deal, Sarah continued, her hands still working on her improvised explosives. Single combat. You and me. No weapons. No backup. Winner takes all. Mendoza's laughter echoed through the radio. You think this is some Hollywood movie? I have 60 men and enough firepower to level this entire estate. Why would I risk? Because you're a coward, Sarah interrupted, her voice carrying across the estate's PA system for all to hear. You hide behind armies and poison because you're too weak to face your enemies directly. Prove me wrong. The silence stretched for long moments before Mendoza responded, his voice tight with rage. Very well, Doctora. The main lawn, 5 minutes. But when I kill you, your friends die anyway. Sarah finished her preparations, creating a dozen small explosive devices from the chemistry set components. Not enough to bring down the house, but sufficient to create chaos and confusion. She handed half to Marcus, keeping the rest for herself. What's the plan? Marcus asked. You create a distraction at the back of the house. Draw as many of his men away as possible. I'll face Mendoza on the lawn and try to get close enough to take him out. That's not a plan. That's suicide. Sarah kissed him then, fierce and desperate, tasting blood and fear and love. If we don't make it out of this, I want you to know that these 2 years with you were the happiest of my life, even if they were built on lies. They weren't lies, Marcus said fiercely. The assignment was real. But everything else, every moment, every kiss, every time I told you I loved you, that was the most honest thing I've ever done. They moved through the house together. Marcus heading for the rear exit while Sarah walked toward the front door. Her wedding dress, torn and stained with dirt and blood, trailed behind her like a battle standard as she stepped onto the main lawn, where she'd stood at the altar just hours before. Diego Mendoza waited for her in the center of the lawn, a compact man with dead eyes and hands that had orchestrated countless murders. He dismissed most of his men to the perimeter, confident in his ability to handle one woman in a wedding dress. You look beautiful, Doctora, he said mockingly. A shame this will be your funeral dress as well. Funny, Sarah replied, her hand closing around one of her improvised explosives. I was thinking the same thing about you. Mendoza lunged forward with surprising speed, but Sarah was ready. She'd spent 3 years in witness protection, learning self-defense, preparing for this moment. As he reached for her throat, she triggered the first explosive, filling the air with smoke and chemical fire. The battle that followed was brief but vicious. Mendoza was stronger and more experienced, but Sarah fought with the fury of someone who'd lost everything and had nothing left to lose. When he pinned her to the ground, she triggered another explosive directly beneath them. The blast throwing them apart as Mendoza struggled to his feet, dazed and bleeding. Sarah heard the sound she'd been waiting for helicopters approaching from the ocean. Not Mendoza's reinforcements, but Morrison's backup, finally arriving with overwhelming force. "It's over, Diego," she said, standing over the cartel leader with her final explosive in hand. "Your empire dies with you." But instead of killing him, she stepped back as SEAL Team 6 swarmed the lawn, taking Mendoza into custody. Justice would be served in a courtroom, not on a blood-soaked wedding venue. Marcus found her as the sun set over the Pacific, wrapping his arms around her as medical teams treated the wounded and federal agents processed the crime scene. Her wedding dress was ruined, her perfect day destroyed, but she was alive, and so was everyone she cared about. "So," Marcus said softly, "want to try this wedding thing again? Maybe somewhere with better security?" Sarah laughed, surprising herself. "Only if you promise to use your real name this time." "Deal," he said, kissing her forehead. "Elena Rodriguez has a nice ring to it." As they stood together among the ruins of their perfect wedding, Sarah realized that sometimes the most beautiful beginnings came from the ashes of the worst endings. She was no longer Dr. Elena Vasquez, the victim, or Sarah Martinez, the naive bride. She was someone strong enough to face her past and brave, enough to build a future worth fighting for. The wedding was over, but their real story was just beginning.